Hello, students, and welcome back as we continue talking about the Reformation and the second half of Chapter 2. So, previously, we talked about the beginning of the Reformation and the critiques that Martin Luther had against the Catholic Church. In today's class period, we'll actually talk about the results of that decision to post that on the church door in Wittenberg, Germany, and ultimately what the fallout was and how we end up with all of these different Christian denominations. Please title your notes for today, The Protestant Revolt. So again, just as a quick reminder, any Christian religion that is considered Protestant is essentially protesting the Catholic Church and its different rituals and ceremonies. So jumping into the actual lesson, we're going to begin with this primary source. This is actually Martin Luther's response to Pope Leo X, who becomes angered once Martin Luther posts his 95 Theses. So pause the video here and answer this question. What tone does Martin Luther take in his letter to Pope Leo X? Again, pause the video as needed and then resume once you're ready to hear the analysis. So overall, in this letter, Martin Luther takes a very accommodating and kind tone. He says, "I have said nothing of you but what was honorable and good. I have indeed spoke sharply against unholy doctrines. Wherefore, most excellent Leo, I ask you accept my vindication made in this letter, and to persuade yourself that I have never thought any evil concerning your person." So he has nothing against Pope Leo X. "You, Leo, are sitting like a lamb in the midst of wolves. You are the innocent one, and you are surrounded by all of these corrupt officials." He says the Roman court is not worthy of you. So essentially, in layman's terms, he's really trying to butter the Pope up and saying that he has no problem with the Pope himself, but rather all of the clergy members he is deeming to have been corrupted. However, of course, the Pope is in on the selling of these indulgences and does not take kindly to Luther nonetheless. So the Holy Roman Empire, which is HRE, that's just an acronym, was made up of 300 small kingdoms, each ruled by a local prince. Above them was a single emperor known as Charles V. So Charles V and the Pope essentially share power with one another. It's a delicate power balance. The Pope technically has the most power in like a spiritual or religious sense, but politically the most powerful person, perhaps in the world, is Charles V. Charles V would oftentimes call meetings of princes to discuss political matters, and these were called diets. During the diets, they would divulge information and discuss them. This prompts what's called the Diet of Worms. No, not worms. Worms, like Worms, Germany, where this actual meeting is going to take place. So essentially, the idea is Charles V calls for this diet in Worms, Germany, and basically Luther is put on trial for his actions against the Catholic Church. Pope Leo X is incredibly angry. He wants Martin Luther either to be tried and killed or tried and banished by his own doctrine. But the problem is Charles V realizes that politically this could be dangerous. There are a lot of people who are not happy with the church, and he's trying to avoid the violence and the backlash that would ensue if something were to happen to Martin Luther. Pope Leo X wants Luther excommunicated and banished, but again, we have this very delicate power balance taking place where Charles V is afraid of the possible consequences. Leo, on the other hand, is afraid that if Martin Luther is allowed to speak as a monk and someone who speaks in front of people, he may be able to get these ideas out there, and that could potentially be damaging to the church, which is exactly what happens. So please read primary source B. This is the Edict of Worms, or the final result of Martin Luther's trial, and answer this question. What specifically did the Edict of Worms do? Again, pause the video here and then resume once you're ready for the analysis. So the final verdict during the Edict of Worms was everyone was forbidden from that point on to listen to any words or deeds of Martin Luther, to defend him, to sustain him, to favor any of his teachings, anything about him at all. And for this reason, Martin Luther's books were also burned. Anything that he had produced, pamphlets with his ideas, everything essentially was censored and destroyed. The problem is, because Martin Luther was allowed to speak, the ideas still got out there. As many of the princes were listening to Martin Luther, many did agree with the points he was raising and realized that indulgences and many of the actions of the church were corrupt, but they were too afraid to speak up because they were afraid of being excommunicated. So, the Edict of Worms, issued by Charles V, forbids anyone from interacting with Martin Luther and completely bans his writing from the Holy Roman Empire. Here you can see a painting of the Diet of Worms, and Martin Luther pictured there in the middle, presenting his case to both the church officials as well as the princes from the Holy Roman Empire. So, even as a result of the trial, Pope Leo X goes ahead and he excommunicates Martin Luther. Lutheran princes in Germany, people who had come to support Martin Luther on a smaller scale, issue a protestatio, which essentially means protest. This becomes the backbone for the term Protestant and ultimately leads to the creation of the Lutheran Church, people who are supporting Martin Luther and his teachings. This, of course, will branch out into several different denominations that we'll be exploring in future lessons. But just understand that the term Protestant refers to any Christian faith that is not Catholic. So there are three main branches that we'll be talking about in this chapter: Lutheranism, with the founder being Martin Luther; also Anglicanism, with Queen Elizabeth I of England as its ruler or leader; and Calvinism, founded by John Calvin. You can see some of the other denominations pictured over here on the side: Presbyterianism, Reformed, Episcopalian, Baptist, Methodist, Pentecostal, and many others as well. So it's important to understand that peasants in the Holy Roman Empire had no access to social mobility. So basically, your life was stagnant, almost in the same way that it was during the Middle Ages. And they're listening to Martin Luther talk about the corruption of the church. Many people have paid for indulgences, have paid a lot of money to the Catholic Church, and given themselves to their faith, and it leads them to rise up. Between 1524 and 1525, 300 peasants rise up in a massive rebellion. German monarchs and prince supporting the Pope brutally put down these revolts, and 100,000 peasants are brutally killed. So, last primary source for today, same kind of deal. Pause the video if you need to, read through the source, and answer the question. This asks, how did Martin Luther react to the Protestant Revolt? So, let's go over this together. Martin Luther says that peasants have forgotten their place, and they're violently taking matters into their own hands. They're robbing and raging like mad dogs. He says that people should not allow the devil into themselves. They force many good people to join the devil's league, and anyone who joins in this revolt will go to the devil. He's essentially making the argument that the answer to the corruption of the church is not violence. Again, he's a deeply religious man and wants to preserve the church. He is just arguing for reforms. So please do not understand this as Martin Luther is going against the church or trying to destroy the church. It's all about reform, hence the term Reformation. So, last few points, Charles V defeats the Protestant princes in 1547. But here's the thing. He realizes that he cannot get them to come back to the Catholic Church peacefully. This is after years and years of brutal conflict and brutal fighting. By 1555, after all of this conflict, he agrees to sign what's called the Peace of Augsburg. And you can see over here on the map that the final peace is negotiated in Augsburg, Germany. And this is essential. Star this, bold this, underline this. Make sure you understand this. As part of the Peace of Augsburg, each German prince is allowed to decide the religion for their own state. This is essential because it fundamentally blows apart Europe. The ecclesia that was Europe, where everyone was following the same religion, same faith, is gone. So this significantly deteriorates the power of the Catholic Church. So in line with our chapter on the Renaissance and how the Christian church is losing power and people are turning more toward individualism and humanism, this is just another event or another topic that really plays into this vast change taking place in Europe. In future lessons, we'll talk about some of these religions in a bit more detail. We'll delve into Scotland, Switzerland. We'll talk about Anglicanism in England, and talk about how these different religious faiths will continue to change the European continent. And finally, just to show you on a map, this is the different breakdown. You can see some of the different locations: Anglicanism, Calvinism in these pockets, Lutheranism in central parts of Europe, and then of course Catholicism will remain enormously influential far into our class going forward.